This is Alex, AK Kincaid, and welcome to the AK Show. Today we're talking about how to sell or transfer your firearm without serving time. All right, so hands down, one of the most common questions that I get is, do I have to do anything if I want to sell a gun? I'm actually not surprised that this is one of the most common questions I get, because all we see anymore are more and more gun control laws being passed. You can't do this, you can't do that, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I'm actually going to give you a few questions to focus on. And number one is, what kind of a firearm is it? Is it the kind of firearm that is subject to the National Firearms Act? Because if so, there's a lot of paperwork we need to complete before you transfer that firearm. So you have to complete the right form and you have to pay the right tax. And then once the federal government approves the transfer, then you can actually change hands with the person that's going to receive that firearm. But until then, you're not allowed to do so. Along the same lines, some states now have state registries. I mean, okay, California aside, right? Because California's had a registry since the 1980s at least, and they were the first state to actually implement what is called an assault weapon ban. So you have to be careful and look at the state where you are. Is your firearm registered? And if so, how do you transfer it within your state registry from yourself to another person? So that's number one. What kind of a firearm is it? And answering that question will help you answer that supplemental question of, is it on a registry, either the federal registry or the state registry? The second question is the firearm crossing state lines? Because if so, you have to use an FFL. There's no way around it. And the law says that you have to use an FFL in the state where it's going. So sometimes you are able to ship firearms and get them to an FFL in the state where the person lives who is purchasing or receiving the firearm. But most of the time, the way it works is that you're going to actually have an FFL in the state where you are, and that FFL is going to ship the firearm to the FFL in the other state. And the reason is that many federal firearms licensees aren't going to accept a firearm from a private party. They want it to come from an FFL. That's a whole other show as to why. I just want you to understand that that possibility exists, and here's what you need to remember. If you're crossing state lines, you will have to use an FFL. If you don't, you are violating a federal law known as the Gun Control Act. So some states require that you use an FFL for a background check, even though it's between private parties. But the federal government says if you're crossing state lines, hands down, has to go through the FFL, and a background check has to be conducted on the person receiving the firearm. The third question that you need to answer is, what are the laws of the state where the firearm is going? So look at the laws of your own state, of course. You know, is there any registry that you need to prepare some paperwork for to transfer that firearm? But also, where's the firearm going? And if it's going to a state where there are laws and a registry, you're going to have to comply with that state's laws. So be very careful when you're crossing state lines, and make sure that you are following the federal laws, the state law where you reside, and the state law where the firearm is going. The internet makes it so easy nowadays to advertise on different forums and sell a firearm, but you cannot just let someone from another state drive to your place, pick up the gun, and take it back to their state. That's a violation of the Gun Control Act. So people ask me frequently, if the law doesn't require for my transaction that I use a federal firearms licensee, in other words, I don't have to do a background check, should I? I think you should. And the reason is that you don't want the liability on you. You want to pass that liability off on someone else. And the FFL has the ability to run a background check, make sure that person is not prohibited, and then transfer the firearm to them. And you're never going to be in the hot seat trying to explain why you sold a gun to someone who went out and committed a murder with it, who had 10 felony convictions. Why would you do that? And I understand that we're trying to promote the Constitution. We want to uphold the Second Amendment. We want to preserve our freedoms as much as possible and not have the government interfere. But I'm always concerned about my client's liability. And to that end, I tell them repeatedly, you know, if you can use an FFL, even though you don't have to, my recommendation is that for your sake, you do it. This is Alex, A.K. Kincaid. Sell your firearms, transfer your firearms, but do it in accordance with the law so you don't have to call me to get you out of jail. Thank you for watching The AK Show. Get Alex A.K. Kincaid's book, Infringed, The Gun Owner's Guide to Gun Rights. This is Alex A.K. Kincaid, and thank you for watching The AK Show.